last day, second day, last talk. So thank you for joining us. I'm Meredith Odgers from Qstream, and my colleague here, Michael Connolly. Just to sort of, I know everyone's probably a bit tired, probably heard a lot of information. Your brain could be in a bit of a fuzz. I know mine is by these times. But just, I want to ask you, we're at a learning event. Who has learned something today? Show of hands. Excellent, that's a good thing. Do you want to learn a little bit more just in these last few hours? Show of hands. Okay, we'll try to see what we can do with that, but we'll hope that you'll learn something and take away from this today. Before I hand you over to Michael though, I just wanted to cover off a few things that I've actually heard while I've been at the conference today. There are definitely some themes from the discussions that we've had. You know, we've been attending a lot of the sessions as well, you know, talking to the various stands. And there are a few particular things that we are hearing from learning leaders that they're either challenged with or they just want to join the dots on, frankly. There's a lot of technologies, there's a lot of different learning styles, but how does that all link up together? So today, I hope we'll be able to address some of these, but those main points, first one being ROI. How do I actually measure the return on those training investments and link those learning goals to my business goals or whatever the goals are of your team or organization? That's always a challenge. There's a lot of intangible ways to measure, subjective ways to measure the effect of learning. I suppose with that, it's also the conversations we've particularly been having relate more to how do I go from sort of knowledge-based learning and actually change that into actually an understanding and then application when you go back to your desk or in the field, and ultimately behavior change. And then when we talk about these things, it's like, well, how do you measure behavior change? It feels like a very intangible area to A, influence, but B, measure the impact of that behavior change and how you do that. So there's some of the things that we've been hearing. I don't know if that resonates with some of you here today, but hopefully through this presentation and talk, we'll be able to address some of those things. We will take some time for some questions at the end, so if you do have those, please raise your hand. And then with handing over to Michael, so Michael's going to focus on, by the way, who's heard of the term microlearning? Okay, that's good. We don't have to start too much with that. Okay, good. So Michael's going to be talking about behavior change and proficiency. Some of the work that he's going to reference is some research, clinical trial studies that our Qstream co-founder, Dr. Price Kerfoot, has actually run, and Michael will reference some of those. And there's also been some other research. A paper was just published last week by learning specialist Todd Maddox. He's a learning scientist based over in the US, and he has a certain methodology, I suppose, of looking at the behavior change piece. So there's a paper on that Michael will reference. If you'd like a copy of that paper, come by at the end. I can scan you and send it to you, or drop by the booth and I can scan you. But if you want the full paper, it's also on our website, so you can go there. But I'll hand it over to Michael now. Michael works with our customers all across Europe. We global customers, usually large corporate enterprises, very complex businesses, global distribution, etc. He works with those customers every day on their accounts. So I now welcome you to put your hands together for Michael.
Oh, thanks. How many of you, can you hear me okay? Yeah. How many of you attended the session on neuroscience about 2 hours ago by Saba? No, not as many as I thought. I mean, it was standing room only on the aisles. I was very impressed with the amount of people that showed up for it. And because of that, I'm going to change my presentation a little bit today, because obviously there's a tremendous amount of interest, I think, around the whole concept of neuroscience and how it impacts learning. So my focus today is actually going to be around the same idea of neuroscience and how that enables knowledge retention, but ultimately behavior change. So I will focus on the science that backs up Qstream. So I'm going to do a little different take on my presentation based upon the reactions I saw to the Saba presentation. Not that I'm stealing anything from Saba, but they talked about emotions and how that impacts people. Qstream uses a similar approach and how your brain reacts differently to different kinds of training. Okay? I'm glad people are familiar with the term microlearning because it is, to a certain extent, a new term. It's kind of the term du jour.
Sorry, what was the question?
Can we just explain microlearning?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, it means different things to different people. That's why Meredith asked you right out of the gate if people are familiar with it, because I think a number of hands went up here, and I bet you if you asked all of those individuals, you'd probably get a different explanation. So we'll tell you what we mean by it. What we mean by it is an agile learning system that's 24/7, preferably mobile, is engaging, is fun to use, and it gives the learning in bite-sized chunks over a period of time. That is the explanation of what microlearning is for Qstream. It's different things for different people, but that is what microlearning is for us. And I'll take you through a couple of slides where we position it against traditional LMS systems. Okay, but thank you for the question. Okay.
Well, this is just what you just said, I suppose.
Yeah. So again, everything that we do, everything that Qstream does is based upon research. In fact, somebody just challenged us, came to our stand and challenged us. We say we are the only microlearning system that's proven by science, is driven by data, and is based upon research from our customers. And when we make those three statements, we're actually able to back them up. Okay? Because we search from our customers. So this is what our customers are telling us. This is what they want from a microlearning system. Okay? We focus on three skill sets. So this dovetails back into what Saba was talking about today. When you go, they showed you, for those of you that were here, they showed you an example of the brain. And the brain is used in different ways with different skill sets. Okay? So we have hard skills. Hard skills are fact-based skills. They typically are, for example, if you're a salesperson and you're selling a product, the hard skills are fact-based, they're facts about your product. So that requires a certain amount of cognitive thinking. You have to be able to remember those facts. Sadly, as human beings, our brains are hardwired to forget facts. So you have to have some kind of a methodology that will reinforce learning of facts. So how that is done in the brain is different to how you work with soft skills. Soft skills are very people-oriented. It's how Meredith and I interact with you folks here today. Are we on the same scale as you? Do we have empathy with you? Are we communicating with you? Are we getting across to you? That's what soft skills are about. And then situational awareness, that's where you pull it all together. You have the facts, you have the people skills, but you're out in an environment, say with a customer, and the customer raises a challenge with you. For example, you're a salesperson and you've been trying to get through to a customer for the last 4 weeks, calling him every week. You finally get through to that customer, and the customer goes, "Oh, hey Mike, sorry I couldn't return your call, but I've been really busy training and coaching my 7-year-old daughter's soccer team." Now, how do you react to that? Well, if you have no empathy, right, you'll go, "Training a 7-year-old daughter's soccer team? My call is way more important than that." But if you have empathy, what you'll probably say, "Okay, that's interesting. How old is your daughter? How good is the team?" You'll engage that person about the daughter and coaching the soccer team, because obviously that's what has prevented that person from returning your call. So that's where, again, the situational awareness comes in. And so how you actually interact, use all these skills, depends upon how your brain works. And that's where Qstream comes in, is we train you to make sure you can synthesize all of these skills. Now, this is probably fairly provocative, what we're saying up here, why legacy LMS systems are failing. How many of you here in this audience use LMS? Okay, about half of you. Okay. LMS does a great job, but here are some of the limitations that our customers who use LMS tell us. Okay? So here are the traditional learning systems. LMS is part of them. But the problem is most of these systems don't do any of this for you. So one of the things that we've heard from everybody we've talked to here at this conference that's come by and talked to us is one of their challenges as learning executives is trying to get their companies to align business goals with their learning goals. That is a challenge for most. Are there people in the audience who find that as a challenge for them? I see people nodding their heads. Okay, so one of the important things that we try to do at Qstream is give proof of an ROI on your training methods. Prove to senior executives that training there are performance indicators. It does impact the bottom line. It does impact your performance goals. So these are some of the things that agile micro-learning systems do that LMS systems don't do. So this is called, is it Bursting? What's his
that person.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he references a lot of, mobile in the daily flow of work, and it's not just Burson. A lot of analysts, but our customers are actually saying this too. Engaging and fun, not engaged, not learning. That's a pretty obvious one. But how do you actually overcome those things? And then bite size is just such a plethora of information. You think about when you're onboarding as a new employee, you're just inundated at that time with so much information. It's probably expected that you won't retain and remember all of that. You'll be going back to your desk or out into the field, and you've got to really get the brain going. So that sort of bite-sized learning, breaking all of that down into smaller chunks, it can be a more effective way of doing that for longer-term retention.
And one of the key things that we find is it has to be engaging and it has to be fun. So as a company, we have worked with those 400,000 employees over the last 10 years. We've run what are called Qstreams for them, and I'll explain what that is. We've run about 10,000 of those. And the key to the success of those systems is making it engaging and fun. That's critical. At the end of the day, even though while everybody here is talking technology to you, at the end of the day, we still believe it's all about people. No matter how good your technology is, if you don't get buy-in from in other words, buy-in from the users and buy-in from your executives who support a learning program, the technology is absolutely no good. So at Qstream, we again focus completely on people. It's all about making people better at what they do. Okay, so I'll now come to the brain part, the neuroscience part of Qstream, and why we make the claim that we are the only micro-learning system that's based upon proven science. And the reason is because this gentleman here, he is an associate professor at Harvard Medical School. He is the co-founder of Qstream, and he is a leader, he is a pioneer in the whole field of knowledge retention through behavior change. So how many people have heard of Ebbinghaus? Okay, all right. So Ebbinghaus started his research into the whole forgetting phenomenon back in the 19th century. And all of the studies that have followed on from Ebbinghaus have been very theoretical. What Dr. Price Carefoot did was he went one step beyond that, and he took the theory and put it into practice with 20 clinical studies in a number of different environments, primarily hospital environments with trainee doctors. So if you can think about the life of a trainee doctor, they're under a lot of pressure. They have to remember a lot of scientific facts for their exams, and they're out there on the hospital floor in A&E departments where they have got to react very, very quickly in situations. They've got to make decisions about what they do with the patients. Okay? So his challenge was, how do I make life for these people better? So he embarked on these clinical studies to put some of his theories to rest. So I'll take you through two of those studies right now. One is with doctors in a hospital. The other is with type 2 diabetes patients. So the two studies are quite different, but the outcomes are the same. The outcomes are that using this methodology that he came up with, which is called spaced learning and testing, you can actually change behavior over time. Okay, so with the first group here, this is what we call a control group, and this is the group that got their learning via Qstream. With the control group, we gave them the knowledge in the traditional method. So the knowledge is all about PSA testing. For those of you that don't know what PSA testing is a cancer test for men over the age of 60. It is very expensive to administer, and it is not a very inexact. So hospitals are always trying to make sure that the test is only used in the right environment. So for the purpose of these doctors here, the hospital brought out new guidelines, and it was going to observe the doctors as they worked on the hospital floor to see if they would abide by the guidelines for the new PSA testing. So as I said, this group here, the control group, just got the information in written form. We're told go off, read it, learn it, and you will be observed on the hospital floor. This group here got it in the Qstream method, which is bite-sized chunks over a period of time. So the learning was split into 10 to 15 key learning points that were shared with them over a period of 8 weeks. They got the challenge, and then they were tested on it. So they got a challenge about the particular learning point from here. They were tested on it, and then three things actually happened right away. They got immediate feedback on how they did in that particular challenge. They got feedback on how their peers did. Because one thing that we learned through these clinical studies is that if you give a peer group of people a challenge and they're all getting the same challenge, everybody in that group is going to be motivated to do at least as well as their colleagues. So we start tapping into behavioral science when we do that, when we give feedback on how you're doing compared to your colleagues. And the third thing that they get is they get the explanation. That's the learning. And this is repeated. They get the challenge again, they get it a second time, 2 weeks after they get it the first time. Okay? So you have two groups that start off with the same level of knowledge, but at the end of the period, when we measured results a month after this Qstream finished, we found that this group here had a 40% increase in accuracy on their PSA readings, which proved that their behavior had changed using the Qstream spaced learning system. Okay, so that's with doctors in a hospital. So let's go to some, I think most of you in this room probably know somebody with type 2 diabetes. How many people know somebody with type 2 diabetes? We all know it is probably the fastest growing disease in developed countries today, in North America and in the UK, for example. So Dr. Price Carefoot 2 years ago decided to do a test with diabetes patients using the Qstream method to see if he could change their lifestyle behavior over a period of 6 months. So what we set out to do was change their behavior from a dietary point of view, from an exercise point of view, and how regular they took their medicines. So here you have the, here you have the Qstream group, and here you have the control group. Little different this time. Both of them do get Qstreams. This particular group here got a game to play on their mobile device. This group here got the actual Qstream challenges. Now, you may be wondering, well, what kind of challenges do you actually give diabetes patients? Well, one of the challenges could be, so they're scenario-based, contextually rich. So they might be, what is the best way for you to control what you eat at the table? Here are your choices. Eat from a small plate. Push back from the table as soon as you've finished your meal. Eat from a larger plate. Stay sitting at the table for an hour after you've finished your meal. There is one correct answer in there. So the patients would pick that correct answer, and then they would be tested on it again 2 weeks after the fact. So we ran this test over a period of 6 months, and then we actually measured their glucose levels at the beginning of the study and a year after the study was finished. It's important to realize that The reason we did it a year afterwards is because we want to see if there is knowledge retention and behavior change out into the future. And what we found is that this group here had consistently low blood glucose level readings a year after they actually did the Qstream challenge. So they changed their behavior from an exercise point of view, dietary point of view, and how regularly they took their medicines. Okay, so what underpins all of this is the way you actually set the challenges for the participants. They have to be context rich and they have to require action. So again, in the case of the two studies that I showed you, the way we set up the scenario-based challenges were relevant to either people's jobs or their lifestyle. So for example, with the patients, with the doctors in the hospital, they knew they had to perform based upon the new PSA guidelines. So the way we set the scenarios for them to be challenged on were very specific to those PSA guidelines. With the diabetes patients, the scenarios we built for them were built all around daily habits, either exercise, eating, what you do on a daily basis. So again, they would relate to those challenges and they would engage because of the challenges. So the situations have to be context rich, the answers have to be context rich, and it's all about engaging you, getting critical thinking going. Now, for a micro-learning system to work, for the Q system to work, we have identified 5 key stages in a successful micro-learning system. The first one is identifying performance goals that you can then tie back into learning. So that might be, for example, with your sales team, you might say, we want our sales team to outperform this year by 10%. We want more than 10% of our sales reps to be above quota. So how do we tie that back into Qstream-based scenarios for sales reps? Okay? So that's where we start. We identify your company goals and we align that to your learning. We then build these bite-sized challenges that are scenario-based and that don't disrupt your job. So the typical Qstream challenge that you get on a mobile device takes 3 minutes of your day. Okay? So it's non-disruptive. And then we test. So again, just like we did with the diabetes patients and we did with the doctors, we test how you're actually processing that knowledge. The testing is a critical part of what we do. And then the outcomes. We identify gaps in learning, where you might need coaching, where individuals might need coaching. And then we use analytics to give senior management an indication of where they should be planning for the future from a learning point of view. And this is where you're actually able to measure your ROI on your investment in learning. So I'll give you a real-life example of how we used this recently with a customer. How many of you here are in the pharma industry? Nobody? Okay, so the pharma industry is going through quite a revolution right now. It's trying to change the marketplace perception of what pharma companies are. So they have this mission to be seen as patient-centric. To be seen as patient-centric, they've got to change how their sales reps interact with HCPs, with doctors, with hospitals. One of our pharmaceutical customers a year ago came to us and said, look, we're having a problem. The number of doctor office visits that our sales reps are having has fallen off precipitously. We've called the doctors to find out why is this happening. And the doctors have shared with us that, look, your sales reps aren't driving value for us anymore. Their conversations aren't patient-centric based, they're just pushing drugs. Buy 5 of these drugs, you get the 6th one free. That model, they said, no longer applies. So they said, we have no interest in meeting your sales reps. So the customer came to us and said, what are we going to do to change the behavior of our sales reps? So we said, well, we've got to focus on the 3 skills. Firstly, on the hard skills, you've got to make them more knowledgeable about your products. They've got to be more knowledgeable about the drugs, the side effects of them, and how they compare with compete with their competitors. That's number 1. You've got to change their soft skills. They've got to be able to interact better with the doctors and understand what are the pressures doctors are under today. Patients are coming in and they're going, well, I've consulted Dr. Google, and Dr. Google is telling me this. What do you think? So doctors are under a lot of pressure to be able to answer those things. So we said, we will set up a number of Qstreams for you, and a Qstream is a series of cognitively based challenges spread over a period of time, typically 6 weeks, based upon 10 to 15 key learning points. We will build in there a mixture of soft skills and hard skills. Hard skills about your drugs, soft skills about how to deal with the doctors. And we ran 3 of these Qstreams over a period of 9 months. And at the end of the year, the pharmaceutical company went back to the doctors and found that the number of doctor office visits for their sales reps had climbed up. They did research again with the doctors to find out why that was so, and the doctor says, your sales reps, their behavior has changed completely in the space of a year. They now are having value-add conversations with us instead of the transactional type conversations. So that is just one example of how you use Qstream to actually change behavior, and in the process you're actually reinforcing knowledge. And we've only got 5 minutes left, and we've pretty well covered what I wanted to, so I'll give you the last 5 minutes if you have any questions for us.
So, does anyone have any questions? Go, give us one, just for the end of the day. Do you mind using the microphone, because it's a bit hard to hear, just for us as well as the audience? Will I ping if I go around? I don't want to get that screechy sound going on. Thank you, it should be on already, thank you.
Hi there, great presentation. How do you make it context-rich a situation? For example, if you're trying to train a car mechanic to do a particular task, how do you know his behavior is not going to be different in the garage as opposed to when he's reading the app at his kitchen table?
That's a great question.
Sorry, do you mind just
There's 2 parts to the question, okay? I think your first part was around content, because content backs up the scenario. So what we do that's kind of unique that some of the other companies we compete with don't do is we believe that the best content to build scenarios around is your content. So we take your content and we break it down into these scenario context-rich situations, and then you approve them before you actually roll them out to your employees. So all the context, all those scenarios are very, very unique, very different to your company. So again, let's say with pharmaceutical companies, we have about 100 pharmaceutical clients. How each of them rolls out a Qstream is going to be different based upon their content. So that's the first answer. So that's critical. Content is what drives the scenarios. We make them contextually very rich, and also they have to be cognitively challenging. As I said, all of this is about engaging with the brain. How do we then follow up, and how do we make sure that what they do is actually changing behavior, right? That was your follow-on question. So there's 2 ways. What this topic was all about is we do measure proficiency. So when we are building the scenarios, the cognitively based scenarios, we have a proficiency rating between 65% and 75% that we will pitch those scenarios in. Anything below 65% and it's going to be too difficult, anything above 75% it's going to be too easy, and you will lose the engagement from your participants. We then measure off that base reading. So every time that our customers do a Qstream, we measure the increase in proficiency. And why is proficiency important? Well, we talk about the 3 Ps. We talk about performance, productivity, and proficiency. Performance is easy to measure. Let's say for salespeople, it's how well did you do with your quota last year. Productivity, what are you doing on a daily basis? How much are you doing? But proficiency is much harder to measure. Proficiency is not about what you do, it's about how well you do it. And on every single Qstream that we do, we measure proficiency. So we go back to our customers and we say, your participants started off at this level of proficiency. They are now at this level. That is the improvement in their knowledge and in the way they're executing according to that, and that's the change in behavior. Yeah. So we measure everything that we do. Does that help answer the question?
One thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, one thing to add to that too, I would imagine in that situation it's a very hands-on practical type role. So there is the parts that Michael was talking about, but the other thing that you could do by a Qstream is do video scenarios. So you could actually present rich text videos as the scenario rather than text-based or with images. But you can then ask the employee, the mechanic, to record. We actually, Qstream's all about micro-learning, short minutes a day. So we actually limit those videos to 3 minutes so that the manager doesn't have hours of videos to sort of go through and evaluate. So they, if it's something visual that they might need to, I don't know, change a part on a tire. I'm really not a mechanic. You could actually show, like they could video themselves doing that, and then the manager can look as if they're doing that in the correct way, for example. So there's those options as well to visually assess and give that feedback to that employee too.
And this is how you do this on your mobile device. So you get 3 minutes, and then your manager can give you feedback immediately on your confidence level and on your proficiency.
Yeah. I think we've got one more question, but do we have time? I'll just ask. Yep, one more question. Yep, it'd be great, thank you.
Quick one then. How do you deal with some of the criticism of microlearning? So there was a talk a little bit earlier saying that it's not going to promote transformation or deep learning or deep skills. Is it really about the microlearning, or is it about the spaced repetition and the retrieval?
Okay.
Yeah, I can take the first part of that one. I'll turn that one off now. So I guess, can you turn me back on? So I think earlier on somebody asked what does microlearning mean? And we said there's many definitions of it. If you take microlearning in its most basic context, it's just taking large format content and breaking it down. But that alone, that part of microlearning isn't enough actually. So I would actually partially agree with some of that theory that that alone does not give that deep learning in any way. But I think probably what you've heard from Michael, it's a combination of like what I would call sort of more best practice microlearning. The content itself does need to be contextually rich, cognitively challenging, all of those scenario-based, etc., to help with that deeper understanding. But then there's the other part that embeds that, so the game mechanics, all the things that keep it engaging. I'll just give you an example. I think Michael's given some quite complex examples for pharma customers and what have you, but we also have customers in financial services that are dealing with very, very complex regulation and changes and how they would actually behave in certain situations. All of those sorts of things sort of show that the actual microlearning done in a good way can actually help that deep learning experience. So I partially agree with it, but I don't 100% agree with it because it depends how it's done. Okay. So thank you very much, everyone, today, and thanks for hanging in there with us.
Right.
We really do appreciate it, and hopefully you did learn something from the talk today. And as I mentioned, if you want a copy of that paper that we were referencing earlier, I can zap you, or you can just visit our website. It's just on the top strip of the homepage at the moment. Okay, thanks very much.
Yes, thank you very much. Thanks.